In the public eye, the leaders of the heroic Galato 5 and the villainous organization Gecko are sworn enemies. In reality, they're pursuing a forbidden romance. Fudo and Desumi had their date while they wore their hero and villain suits. As the cherry blossoms fell on the green grass, Desumi offered the cookies that she baked last night to her beloved Fudo as she showed her shyness and feelings towards him. With a flushed face, Fudo accepted the box of cookies and took his time to savor the taste of the sweet gift his ultimate lover had given him. This peaceful, perhaps ironically serene date is different compared to what they actually do in life. Concurrently, the forces from Fudo's team and the armies from Desumi's troops fought for their lives without having any idea about their leader's secret rendezvous. Above was where the war happened, and literally below, on the grassy fields, was where the two had their date. Fudo suggested holding hands with his dear lover just like any other couple would do. At first, Desumi blushed and refused as she believed it was too early for them to do such an intimate gesture on their third date, but she gave in to it anyway. When they were about to hold hands, a member of Fudo's troop suddenly climbed up to where they were and looked for him. Startled and afraid to be caught in intimacy, the two of them immediately transformed into their armored suits and fought each other as they were not lovey-dovey seconds ago. For context, Fudo and Desumi came from two different organizations. Aikawa Fudo was the Freezing Sentai Galato 5's team leader, who was named Red Galato, while Desumi Magahara, aka Princess Reaper, was the leader of the underground combatants called the Secret Society Gecko. Basically, they came from two opposing groups. Fudo belonged to the Hero Squad and Desumi from the Villain Guild. Despite the unfortunate situation, both engaged in a taboo relationship. Subsequently, the next day, Fudo was training for another probable interaction with the enemies. The Pink Galato, Haru Arashiyagawa, came in to inform Fudo of the scheduled team meeting and offered to walk with him. As the two of them walked towards the meeting room, they saw Hayato, the Blue Galato, who was flirting with some young girl who eventually slapped him for being too annoying. As Hayato recovered from the agony of rejection seconds ago, the Yellow Galato, Miyazaki Jinjuji, the Green Galato, Daigo Todoroki, met them halfway along the hall to the meeting area. As soon as they arrived, Professor Big Galato, who had funny-looking curly hair, greeted them before they started the meeting. Desumi's villainous picture flashed on the screen as the topic for the day. Interpersonally, Fudo's expression spoke so much feeling and concern for his beloved Desumi while the professor discussed Gecko's plan to dominate the world. In the middle of their discussion, an emergency alert alarmed them that indicated Gecko Society's presence and danger in the city. Immediately, the group rushed to the location and faced them. Moreover, the Freezing Sentai Galato 5 transformed one by one with fruit symbols: red for strawberry, blue for soda, yellow for lemon, pink for peach, and green for pistachios, which amazed the children who were around the area where they clashed. Red Galato, Fudo, ordered the others to take charge of the Gecko's bear while he took charge of Princess Reaper, Desumi. As the group left, the two fought extremely, rivaling each other. Red Galato blushed from the compliment he received from Princess Reaper regarding his fighting skills. He was about to give back the butterflies in his stomach and flirt more with her, but the bear had already been defeated and had cried while requesting the Reaper to retreat. Back at their headquarters, Red Galato became more determined to fight and meet her again in the future, so he furiously worked on his bodybuilding training while the professor observed him from a distance. With his curiosity, the professor went up to Fudo and asked him about the surge of determination he had got that day. The professor assumed mistakenly as he thought it was to condemn the enemy. However, Fudo confessed it was about love. Without knowing who Fudo was interested in, the professor supported him in confessing his feelings to the one he loved. Fudo rushed out to proclaim his intentions to Desumi. A little misunderstanding on Desumi's part formed while they had rendezvoused at night, but Fudo reassured the flushed-faced princess that what he felt was true. Without a signal, he asked Desumi to be his girlfriend and assured her that they would work it out together, despite their complicated situation. Desumi viewed Fudo as dreamy in the moonlight, while she acted strong and vigilant in front of him. And after all that, came the day they sat on the green grass amidst all the war that had occurred below them as their third date. However, they had to keep their love affair a secret from both organizations, as they believed it was impossible for them with the roles they played. 6 months prior to the event of Desumi and Fudo becoming secret lovers, Princess Reaper showed up unexpectedly and showed amazing skills and powers to the Freezing Sentai Galato 5 one day. Since Red Galato was the most powerful of the group, he was obliged to fight her off and somehow was slightly smitten by her moves. Eventually, they both felt the same way but felt guilty just at the thought of a villain-hero relationship. Back to the present. The Gecko Society had caused another war with the freezing Sentai Gelato 5 when a newscaster flew up in a helicopter and showed the audience via television Desumi and Fudo's fight. Meanwhile, the two signaled each other their next move to avoid hitting one another. Afraid to hurt their beloved, they both signaled to find each other's own space. So, they rendezvoused behind big shipping cargo containers. Both sat distantly from each other, hidden from the world as their hearts pounded by each other's presence. Fudo asked why Desumi was too distant, and she retorted about her being smelly. Almost too dense, Fudo assured her that he loved her no matter how she smelled, and this only made her angry and she looked away. Suddenly, a flash of a camera blinded Desumi. Fudo took pictures of her angry expressions until Desumi baited in. She took her phone and shoved him closer to her for a selfie. They were excited for the pictures, not until they both realized how close they were. Their faces crimsoned from the proximity, but they let it be and kept taking some pictures for memories. However, at the most perfect timing, Yellow Gelato Misaki, who was characterized by her bountiful, blessed bosoms and peachy, almost brown hair, came to look for Fudo. Fudo, on the other hand, panicked at her sudden presence and did not know what to do. Fortunately, Desumi was quick to react to such urgency and instantly acted defeated, flat on the ground. As if she was defeated by the hero again, she tried to hide the overwhelming bursts of feelings she had for Fudo. Meanwhile, along with Yellow Gelato Miyazaki, came the media who wanted to interview the hero who saved the day again by defeating the Princess Reaper of the Gecko Society. Little did he and Desumi know that the questions thrown at him would be quite personal and directed at his love life. With the first thrown question, Fudo froze in place. The media asked him about his present relationship. He wanted to proclaim to the world his love for Desumi, who was already on the verge of dying when he spoke about his love interests. In her mind, she just wanted to die at that point because of the giddy feeling she had when he had spoke about the girl of his dreams, which she knew was directed at her. Subsequently, the media ended their interview with the guidance of Miyazaki, who mentioned the people who wanted to go on a date with Fudo and indirectly allowed the interested watchers to give it a shot with him. Desumi's heart sunk into the pits of her stomach as she heard of this and felt inferior. So, when she was left alone with Fudo again, she avoided his contact and distanced herself. This was only cured with an overloaded reassurance from Fudo that he was capable of dating her like any other real date that normal people do. He then promised her a real date in the city, which motivated Desumi to immediately rise from where she was lying a while back. Eventually, they bid their farewells and looked forward to the day they scheduled their date. Thus, Desumi went flying away first, and left Fudo confused about what people normally do on a real date. As soon as he got home in their headquarters, he took the time to research what activities he should have done during their date. As he went further into his research, he was immensely pressured by the variety of choices and activities there are and what would be best for their relationship. Frustrated enough, he complained and worried himself on the agenda. Luckily, the drunk and groggily active Misaki came into the training room where he was. Then she saw what exactly he was busying himself with. With only a few seconds, Misaki gave him the best advice on dating even without knowing who he was in a relationship with or who he was interested in. He mustered the courage to try again with the research, but this time he had one goal: activities that both of them would enjoy. On the day of their date, Fudo took Misaki's words seriously and decided to focus on what makes them happy. So, he wore his usual gym clothes and brought Desumi to the gym. He made her work out like how he does. Extreme. As the day ended, he brought Desumi to a bench near a lake to have protein bars as their dinner, when she expected him to have reserved a good restaurant. Taken aback but not surprised by this, Desumi told him she wanted to go to the bathroom for a second. Fudo thought he was doing great when all of a sudden, Misaki called him. She discouraged him from doing all the things she told him back then as she was drunk at the time. He then realized that he did the total opposite of what a date should have been and how he could have treated a girl as soon as Miyazaki shared her sober advice. He quickly ran to where Desumi went off. He was scared, shaken, and confused about what to do because he thought that she had already left him for his stupid activities. But only did he know Desumi's perceptions when he had landed his knees on the ground. Desumi laughed at him when he explained everything and assured him that she had a fun date, and the gesture of planning the date for her was enough for her. This moment brought them butterflies and overwhelming emotions that kept them high even during a fight between both organizations. Inside the meeting area of the Gelato's headquarters, Professor Big Gelato, Mizaki, and Fudo were on standby for probable emergencies that they may encounter. Fudo was training and, as usual, bodybuilding while he relentlessly thought of Desumi, whom he had not seen for the past few days and had missed so much. Meanwhile, Misaki and the professor were very much focused on their Unon game, which quite resembles an Uno game card. While playing, they spoke of how peaceful it is that the gecko society had not been ravaging the areas of the community. Yet, without any fuss created by the gecko, it was a disadvantage to Tasumi and Fudo's relationship, as they could not interact as much as they could, even just through their fighting. Not long, the emergency alarm rang, signaling the three of them about the Gecko Society's move. The current mission was to infiltrate the Gecko Society and defuse the bomb that had been created. From then, Big Professor and Miyazaki worried heavily, as this mission was almost impossible to have no casualties or damage to them, given how hard it would be without the other members who were away at that moment. On the flip side, it was a huge advantage and a great opportunity for Fudo to meet with his beloved Tasumi, if he was the one to infiltrate their base alone. So without delay, he raised his hand high to volunteer. Professor Big Gelato cried as a tribute to his bravery and begged for him to come back to the headquarters safely, as Miyazaki thought similarly. And as soon as he had changed into his hero suit, they bid their goodbyes and well wishes. Meanwhile, at the Gecko Society's base, Tasumi was bringing along with her a cute pink polka-dotted pouch filled with her personal beautifying materials and makeup, and the bear assumed it was a bomb that she was disguising as a cute pouch. Quite disappointed, she doubted herself and felt insecure about having owned a cute pouch. She was about to discard it when a show of a head came from the ceiling. It was Red Gelato, Fudo, who she encountered. As soon as he got down from the ceiling, Tasumi panicked as she thought it was not safe for them to be inside the Gecko Society together. So she brought Fudo to her dressing room immediately and stayed there to play Uno cards with him when a sudden video call came in for her to receive. Panicking enough, she hid Fudo from the view of her comrade by sitting on his face. Other than that event, the bear went inside her dressing room without notice, so she panicked even more and shoved him and herself into the human-sized locker she had. The goal was to keep silent until the bear left the room, but because of what Fudo accidentally pulled from their tight situation inside the small-spaced locker, Tasumi screamed and caused Fudo to fly from the locker to the bear's face. This resulted in the accidental pull of the bomb's trigger that caused great effect and damage to the enemy's base, which is indeed the goal that Fudo had to achieve in the first place upon coming there. The professor was elated by his success on the mission, and in the meantime, before he came back to the headquarters, he gave his number to Tasumi, but it was actually the landline from his house. Hence, by the time Tasumi called the number, his mother was the one who received the call. After that day, he decided to purchase a smartphone which he did not know how to use. On the next day, at the Gecko Society's base, the bear was fixing the broken signage of the base while the meeting of the highest ranks was going on. In the meeting, Supreme Leader Boslar was present along with the other princesses. Their plan was to accumulate more negative emotions from people to form monsters out of. Moreover, the need for a good communal place was what they were looking for to be able to achieve such a feat. With surges of love in Tasumi's eyes, she suggested places like the theme park, the lakeside, and other dating places she could muster, but was almost rejected when Bosler decided to go with the amusement park. On the other side, a manual for dummies was in his hand while a dumbbell was on the other. Fudo was kept busy by his smartphone, which was the topic Professor Big Gelato and Misaki were going for that time. Misaki was giddy to have found out that someone who was only interested in bodybuilding now had a smartphone. While at that, a ring on his smartphone came, indicative of Tasumi's text that regarded the place that the Gecko Society had planned to attack. With optimism, he came to the amusement park and waited for what was to come. Curious as a cat, Miyazaki did not let anyone stop her from gossiping about Fudo's whereabouts, not even Pink Gelato, Haru. They both followed him to the amusement park, but only got into a fight with the gecko instead. With excitement, Tasumi charged Fudo into a fight while the children rooted for the hero. The bear had to face the two other Gelatos that emerged out of nowhere as planned the other day at the meeting. On the other hand, the two tabooed lovers rendezvoused to enjoy the amusement park and had ridden almost all the rides. At the end of the day, both had ridden the Ferris wheel. Fudo's face was left with exhaustion and weakness from all the exhibitions and rides they had tried. Fear was still obvious on his face, so Tasumi sat down beside him and touched his hand. This brought so much emotion and intimacy between them that almost led them to feel uncomfortable instead, especially Fudo. Nonetheless, they had to go back to the fight as it had already been finished again by the heroes. Behind all the hero and villain scenes resides the normal Tasumi Magahara, a girl who goes to school in the city without anyone knowing about her work as one of the Gecko Society's princesses. As she headed home together with her two close classmates, they discussed how workaholic she was for working every single day. They even assumed that she could no longer find a boyfriend at that point. However, she felt giddy about having someone she loves and keeping it a secret from the world, so she kind of teased them about her not being able to find a boyfriend. Abruptly, They saw Fudo inside a cafe near the school, yet they only knew him as Red Gelato. Typically, Desumi's classmates thought Red Gelato was dating Pink Gelato, Haru, as they were seen inside the cafe having a conversation over coffee. Little did they know, Desumi fumed in jealousy. She saw them and felt insecure about how good of a couple they would look like in public rather than herself with Fudo. So, in the midst of the giggling session her two classmates had going on, she ran, teary-eyed because of what she saw. In different circumstances, Haru wanted to ask Fudo about the picture she saw at the amusement park. She suspected him of having a girlfriend and wanted to confirm it from Fudo himself. She had a hard time expressing her thoughts because her heart pounded even just at the sight of him. When she took her shot, she was only misinterpreted by Fudo. Dense as he was, Fudo talked about protein shakes and bodybuilding throughout the entire conversation, and this assured Haru that he had no girlfriend, or so she thought. Later on, they were both notified by their watches about an emergency mission. They had to fight the Gecko Society, who were bombing establishments. It was an ecstatic time for Fudo as he could finally interact with his lover again, but as soon as he fought her, he was only welcomed with pain and excruciating hits from his girlfriend's enemy. Confused, he tried to understand her moves, and when they were finally secluded from the rest of their troops, she cried and fought him more aggressively. She confessed her jealousy and insecurity about what she saw earlier that day. She told him that she was not fit for love and that he should have stopped their relationship because she had doubted her worth. Amidst her aggression to fight, he hugged her and reassured Desumi that she was the only one he would love forever. In contrast, she confessed that she knew he would never cheat on her and felt guilty because she knew she was the problem. Yet again, he assured her that he would do everything to stop her from feeling that way. So she felt better and requested him to take her on an after-school date sometime, and he agreed and held her hand. Unexpectedly, while they sat there to spend time, Haru was already beside them. Fudo, whose face was filled with anxiousness, almost jolted while Desumi's soul separated from her body. She found out about them, and the only thing in Desumi and Fudo's minds was how things would go after Haru had revealed their secret to Fudo's council. Strangely, nothing had happened, and no one knew about their relationship aside from Haru. Every time they met up with each other, they had to be meticulously vigilant of their surroundings, and this had Desumi crazy. Until that one night they met. Desumi felt something was off about the surroundings, and as dense as Fudo was, he was requested by Desumi to buy her a complex drink to give her time alone. Desumi waited for the appearance, and finally, Haru showed up. She charged at Desumi, who was taken back by her determination to fight despite how great the gap in their skills was. Eventually, Haru was defeated easily and had to stay laid on the ground. Haru then confessed why she joined the Gelato. She had a crush on Fudo and wanted him to look at her the same way. When she found out that the girl who saved her one time from the thugs was the girl Fudo was in love with, she felt terrible and wanted to take him away from her. But she soon figured out that she could not take away the happiness from both of them. So, they both cried their hearts out while they hugged each other for comfort. Inside the Gecko Society's base, a triumphant sound echoed through the halls during a meeting to commemorate the best performing unit and princess. As expected, Princess Reaper won again because of her suggestions, while her unit won through a landslide raid among all the rest. Being used to it, Desumi had anticipated the celebration, while Beast Princess aggressively challenged her to a duel and settled the title for once. Unbothered by Princess Heat's rage, she offered the useless prize to her, which made Beast Princess even more outraged. And even at lunch, Beast Princess vented out all her frustrations and badmouthed Desumi to Steel Princess. Steel Princess shrugged off Heat's competitiveness and changed the topic to what she wanted to talk about for the first time. Her face crimsoned at the thought of what she was about to say. She then confessed shyly to Beast Princess about a love interest that she had been troubled for a couple of days already. Like a spark of a series of lights, Desumi's ears lit up like a radar. Like a flash of light, she immediately scooted over Princess Steel as she wanted to hear her love story. Beast Princess, who was ranting outrageously, was their background, but muted. Princess Steel thought of how she would confess to the one she loved if she was uncompetitive and lacking so many skills compared to other girls. It was as if Desumi's eyes sparkled at the thought of love. She understood Princess Steel above anyone else, as she was the one with a secret relationship and could be insecure most of the time about her lover. Regardless, she tried to help Princess Steel by doing girly activities together with Beast Princess, but as soon as they tried, she managed to fail all of it. This caused the princess emotional turmoil and worsened her insecurities instead. Moreover, Desumi felt guilty because she made Princess Steel feel even worse about herself by helping out. She did not know what to do, not until Fudo told her about his opinion. He spoke his feelings and expressed how sufficient she was to him, and how he loved her just the way she was. She realized that she forgot to tell Princess Steel the most important thing about a relationship, that she did not need to change in order to be loved, but only to be herself and be accepted by her lover for what she is. With no further delay, she bravely entered Princess Steel's room, which had spikes drilled into the walls, like she always does every time she felt hurt. Every step closer was one painful scrape of skin and blood on Desumi's body, but this didn't bother her. She wanted Princess Steel to know that it was never wrong to love or be loved. Hence, the true beauty of Princess Steel as a normal person showed. Soon after, Princess Steel confessed her love to the bear from Desumi's unit. This was almost a laughing matter for Beast Princess to have made such efforts for the love of a bear. Things turned out better for them as the bear had teamed up with Princess Steel during their battle with the freezing Sentai Gelato 5. This resulted in a harder fight for the Gelatos, and for this reason, Blue Gelato looked for Red Gelato to ask for backup, only to be spotted by Pink Gelato, who rooted for Desumi and Fudo's secret meetings. At that point, Desumi and Fudo were left alone. Desumi then took the opportunity to offer the food she had prepared for him. When she was about to feed him, he fell on the ground from the excruciating stomach pain. He was brought to the hospital due to appendicitis and had to recover for a few days. Many tried to feed him and care for his recovery, but he refused to be fed unless it was Desumi. Before the day ended, Desumi visited him at last and took the moment to feed him as the first ever person to share such a romantic gesture with Fudo. Another day had come for Beast Princess, and her rival complex was triggered again when an emergency meeting had occurred in the middle of their lunchtime. Without a clue about what could possibly be the cause of the meeting, she dragged Desumi towards the meeting hall despite her dragging along the pasta Desumi was enjoying, after which joy turned to sadness for Desumi as Bosler announced her promotion as a monster. A monster was the second topmost head above the princesses, yet it came with a transformation. The promoted princess would have been fused with an animal, and for Desumi, a gorilla was chosen. Her stomach churned from the idea as she could no longer do the things she loved to do. She was conflicted by the promotion, but despite that, Beast Princess was overwhelmingly jealous and humbled at the same time. She had fully looked up to the ferocity of Desumi as Princess Reaper, and was even more determined to do better as a member of the Gecko Society combatants. More importantly, as soon as Desumi got home to the dorm, she sat down and tried to process everything that had happened, especially her promotion from earlier. She sulked inside her room and silence filled the empty spaces. She wanted to go to the beach with Fudo as they planned, but she could no longer do so if she had been promoted into a monster. It would not be that big of a deal if her wants were the only problem. Technically, she came from a family of combatants, wherein her mother and father had been members of the Gecko Society and retired. And, as if on cue, her father called to congratulate her on the promotion. She felt dreadful and wanted to tell her parents that she did not want to become a monster for a couple of reasons. But at that moment, when she tried to shoot her shot, her younger sister expressed her idolization towards her. This stopped her from choosing her own happiness and kept her hurdles to herself. She bid them goodbye before she ended the call and sulked more. Minutes later, she was on the verge of crying when her phone suddenly rang. Despite almost throwing her phone away from shock, she answered the call from Fudo. Fudo knew there was something off about her just by the sound of her voice. So, what he did was prove that chivalry had not died just yet. He asked Desumi to end the call and texted her minutes after that he was already outside her dormitory. At the sight of him, the pain and confusion in Desumi's heart felt a lot lighter. She appreciated such a gesture and effort and decided to spend time with Fudo on the terrace of the dormitory, where they could be left alone. She shared her problem with him and somehow felt like a huge weight was taken from her shoulders. She felt even better when he assured her that his view of her would not change, whatever form she took, as long as he was with her. Her face almost popped red because of such a compliment. Nonetheless, Fudo ended his advice and reminded her to also give herself some slack and choose to do the things she loved doing, instead of thinking about what her loved ones wanted her to do. She was assured that whatever decision she made, he was with her all the way, and he would have supported her throughout every journey. So after that night, Desumi gathered the strength to decline the promotion and stood firm in front of Bosler. At first, she thought Bosler would rampage her, but had only applauded her ability to stand for herself and trust her own strength. Days passed by not long until a practice launch of Gelato's new robot was planned to be conducted at the beach. Exhilarated by the news, Fudo instantly called Desumi and gave her a leak of information. Desumi jolted in happiness to be able to enjoy the beach with her lover and inform the Gecko Society of the intel she was given, so a commencement of war would be possible. Without delay, she waited at the beach along with the bear, Princess Steel, and Princess Heat. Sumi was fully ready in her dark blue bat-style two-piece swimsuit when 3 missiles flew loose from an emergent robot from the far depths of the sea. Her smile widened at the sight of it despite the missiles directed towards their direction. She ran as fast as she could when she saw Fudo. Beast Princess was in her mission mode when she was left behind by Desumi. She thought of how brave and ferocious Desumi was for commencing the mission alone, not knowing that Desumi actually ran to enjoy the beach with her beloved Fudo. The moment Beast Princess tried to sneak a peek again in front of the big boulders, she saw Desumi, who was about to whack a watermelon, which Beast Princess thought was Fudo's head. She giggled in excitement at her rival's success when a blonde, beautiful guy came to take her. She was quite confused by the sight of him and realized that it was Blue Gelato. Blue Gelato did not recognize her as a part of the Gecko Society, as she had worn a swimsuit, and knowing Blue Gelato, he was a womanizer and was more focused on finding himself a girl to flirt with. So, without remorse, she was dragged by Blue Gelato to spend time with him while Desumi enjoyed the beach with the rest of the Gelato. Fudo introduced her to the team as a close friend who happened to be near the beach. They had grilled pork barbecue while Professor Big Gelato showcased such wonderful fireworks for the group to enjoy for the success of their robot. While Fudo talked with the other group mates, Miyazaki came closer to Desumi to thank her for Fudo's great improvement as a guy. Meanwhile, Princess Heat, also named Kiki, lost Blue Gelato for the longest time that day. She was exhausted but was dumbfounded when she saw Desumi, who had run towards her while the robot burst and exploded behind Desumi. She really thought Desumi had successfully managed to achieve the mission given by their superiors. The smell of good cooking came from the headquarters of the Gelatos. Green Gelato, Daigo, cooked some rations for Fudo, who was working overtime, while Haru and Misaki came into the dining hall. After cooking, Daigo showed a drunk Misaki who had just arrived and Haru, who was peacefully eating at the dining table, what he had prepared. Misaki, who was obviously wasted, teased Daigo but failed when he showed indifference in response to her punchline. After a short while, he delivered the rations to the training room where Fudo was kept busy. As he approached closer to Fudo, he was quite astonished by the bright pink, girly diary that he was writing on. It was, apparently, an exchange diary with the girl he brought to the beach before. Daigo was even more stunned when he heard the girl's name from Fudo's mouth. At the same time, the food he profusely prepared for Fudo went to waste as he fell to the floor from the spoken name. Like a fear he had held in for years, Desumi's name rang a heavy and fearful tone to his ears. He was brought by Fudo into the treatment room, and after he had woken up, he discussed Desumi with Fudo. The link between Daigo and Desumi was rooted long ago, when both came to live with their parents. And to Taka, he was a well-known kid who had the highest potential in martial arts, up until the 7-year-old Desumi arrived. She was a prodigy in martial arts at a young age. Unfortunately, the dojo where Daigo schooled in closed because the master was defeated by Desumi. Inside the dark, empty halls of the dojo sat a little girl. She cried because teachers always gave up on her. Despite his knowledge that his life might be taken away if he continued to guide the monster, Desumi, he mustered up the strength to become her teacher. So, every time he taught her techniques, she performed them at a level that even he could not have achieved for years of training. He always tried his best to humble Desumi, even if it was clearly his defeat all the time. As she grew as a lonely girl who had lived up to her name, Reaper, her strength equated to the strength of 100 hooligans who challenged her in enormous numbers and groups. Then one winter came. His parents decided to divorce, and he had to transfer and live in Tokyo. He had to fulfill his duty as her teacher for the last time. He even had the guts and tried to defeat her, but in mere seconds, he had himself laid on the ground, crumpled in defeat. Years later, he only knew that she was in Tokyo. Despite how sick he became after hearing such a monstrous name, he had to swallow his fear and obliged himself to recruit her as a member of the Gelato. On the flip side, Fudo simped for the young Desumi, while he jotted down some notes he wanted to tease her with when they had met. Little did he know, the time they would meet was the time Daigo and his student would meet. In a cafe, the three of them met, and Daigo caught up with Desumi for a long conversation. Desumi spoke of how great of a teacher he was, and how she wanted to defeat him after all those years. She really thought that she lacked so much potential and skills, and was not able to defeat her teacher. Daigo, on the other hand, was clueless about her work and her involvement with Gecko. Every time Desumi reminisced about their training way back then, Daigo quivered in fear. Coffee splattered everywhere. He was indeed traumatized by his experience. But what scared him most at that moment was their lovey-doveyness in front of him. and his coffee while he composed himself in front of his student. Daigo assumed that love made her weak, and it triggered him to challenge her into a fight once and for all. By the lakeside, he challenged Desumi that if he won against her, she would stop her relationship with Fudo, and if she won, he would not consider recruiting her anymore, like how she declined a few minutes ago. This raged Desumi into a powerful, dark entity that would never allow anyone to separate her from her beloved Fudo. And even from the moment Daigo transformed into his hero suit, he had already been defeated in mere seconds, like years ago. He accepted his defeat, but before he left, he recognized how great Desumi's potential was, and how immense it might grow in the future. He went silent for a few seconds. He seriously turned his face to them and let Desumi promise to never be recruited by the Gecko Society. It was a gleeful, normal day inside the meeting room where Misaki and Haru, the yellow and pink gelato respectively, stayed and kept themselves busy with paperwork. Fudo went into the meeting room as he was notified about a letter that was intended for him. Typically, he immediately opened the mail in front of the two like how he normally did most times. However, this time, every single hair in his body stood as if goosebumps were the entirety of his being. In a flash, he quickly hid the mail away from the sight of the two, sweaty and anxious at the view of the picture. It was him and Desumi days ago while they walked in an alley with Desumi's arms wrapped around his biceps. His soul almost left his body, but what concerned him the most was the time Desumi learned about the picture and who had threatened them. Meanwhile, at school, Desumi had her lunch with her closest classmates while they spoke about the bento box she had made herself. When she was about to take a bite of her rice ball, someone ate it before her. She was dumbfounded by the event and did not react hysterically much because it was Hojo from Class B who took one of her rice balls. She shrugged it off as she was already used to her being like that. But Kiki, aka Beast Princess, did not let it slide. She scolded Hojo for doing such a deed and made her apologize to Desumi. Despite this, Hojo refused to do so and walked out of the room with a smug look on her face. Later that day, Fudo had to fix the problem at hand. He went to the location where the mastermind of the picture told him to meet him. Perhaps her. It was Hojo who waited for Fudo. She was seated on a bench in a dark alley. Unfortunately, Fudo did not know her and had not heard anything about this girl. Her intention was to blackmail him into doing things that Desumi might misunderstand, or things that would destroy his relationship with her. Hence, he did not do what she told him to do. Instead, he begged her to make it possible that if she would publicly announce their secret, she would enhance their picture and see to it that Desumi would shine the brightest. With this, Hojo almost slapped herself and saw it almost pointless to have talked with this guy. Thus, she commanded him to come back the next day to follow her orders. Fudo did not waste any time, and soon, a fight between Gecko and the freezing Sentai Gelato 5 commenced. The two of them hid from the others while Fudo told Desumi about everything. Desumi almost turned into a monster from what he had revealed to her, but he forced her demon back inside and called her a cutie. Moreover, what struck them the most was the assumption that the girl was in love with Fudo. So, by the time Fudo had to meet the girl again, without hesitation, he rejected the girl's feelings in the context of his assumption about her. Panicking, the girl tried her best to stop him from rejecting her as she was misunderstood. And because she panicked, she accidentally confessed that she loved Desumi and not him. Fudo went silent to listen to the whole explanation, but this only made Hojo feel even more awkward. Suddenly, Fudo smiled and with passion thanked her for seeing Desumi in that kind of light. He even wanted to stay up late at night with Hojo to talk about what they liked about Desumi, but Hojo reminded him that she deemed him as her rival. Additionally, she threatened him with stealing her away. Before they could go their separate ways, a strange thought was left by Hojo. She told him that she had a secret that even Desumi did not know. Meanwhile, a meeting was to be held again at the base of the Gecko Society. Like a formed group of friends, Beast Princess, Steel Princess, and Princess Reaper walked towards the meeting hall together. Through the hallway, they even encountered the Gecko Princess, who was a mysterious person to them, as she wore a full, heavy armor. Before they knew it, the person behind that armor was actually Hojo, who admired Desumi so much. Meanwhile, a fight had commenced again, and as scheduled, Desumi and Fudo hid from the others. This time, they chose a cave for their stay. The two were nervous about the result of their compatibility test, which was 98%. Seconds later, Haru went inside the cave and sat down in front of the two. She had become their accomplice ever since she found out, and now she asked Fudo for a favor to study with her and help her with her lessons. He agreed to it easily, but Haru noticed Desumi, who was acting quite jealous. So she asked her if she was also a slow learner like her, and Desumi nodded. Eventually, they had to pick a place to study, and Desumi volunteered to study at her dormitory in Gecko. They had to disguise themselves as combatants before they could enter the dorm and succeeded anyway. Unexpectedly, Haru and Fudo found out that Desumi was a top student, and the situation had its positive turns. What misfortune came was both Desumi and Fudo did not know how to teach, so they had to force her to leave. When the two of them were left alone, they thought about college and how Desumi's father would want her to fully work at Gecko during that time. Fudo bravely stood firm that he would convince her father to let her go to college with him. Not until the doorbell rang and indicated Desumi's father and sister's arrival, Fudo's soul almost went out of his body, and both did not know what to do. The air in the room felt heavier than ever before. As much as Desumi tried to keep the ambience as friendly as possible, her father had already sat down in front of Fudo, who was also braved up. At first, her dad tested him by spouting words from the Gecko Society. For context, Fudo was wearing a combatant uniform to disguise himself to infiltrate the dormitory and arrive at Desumi's room. She introduced him as some guy she just met, and he named himself Mudo. Her father questioned his presence, a mere low-skill combatant inside a princess's room. Faster than the speed of light, Desumi reasoned that he was helping her study. Contrarily, her father discouraged her from studying and instead focused on being wicked and strong, as it was the needed trait to thrive in an environment like Gecko. Added to that, he reminded her of his chosen path for his daughter to be a full-time employee at Gecko Society. This brought a little sadness to Desumi, as she heard it directly from her father. Fudo did not allow such an idea to pull Desumi down. So, he mustered the courage to persuade her father to reconsider her college life and told him about her dream to go to college. Her sister went inside the room and with no notice punched a hole out of Fudo's face gear with no effort. Fudo was convinced that she was indeed Desumi's little sister by her strength. Worried, Desumi warned him not to talk about family matters with her because her little sister might have a sister complex. Even so, this did not stop Fudo, as he talked more about Desumi. Her little sister reminisced the days when Desumi's eyes were as dark as the night, filled with sorrow and loneliness. She was what her little sisters lived for and adored. Yet, as she saw, Desumi was in love and happy, which irked her to the nth degree. She sulked when Desumi used her dark eyes on her at the moment when she tried to hit Fudo again. Meanwhile, her father was almost convinced about college and told them to talk about it in the near future. Fudo and her father went home that night while Desumi was left to tend to her sister who wanted to see the Gecko Society's base, which she was devoted to joining after middle school. On the next day, Desumi brought her emo little sister to the base, where Desumi was praised and adored as a high-level princess. She looked up to her even more, but every time she saw Desumi giggling and happy, she would worry and be disappointed to see that love had made Desumi weak. On the other hand, Desumi had seemed to figure out why her little sister was acting like that. First, she did not mind all the sulking and continued to have fun with her as she shopped for a cute ribbon for her little sister. Finally, when they were about to have some ice cream crepes, Desumi's sister had enough of her bright personality. So, the little sister ran away from Desumi and cried. In context, the little sister had been bullied for a long time. She was hit, abused, and felt weak because she could not fight and would only stay silent. One time, she was being bullied by 3 guys when Desumi saved her and told her to become stronger in order to survive. Up until that day, she lived up to Desumi's words, but it seemed pointless whenever she saw Desumi's smiling face. Suddenly, 3 guys came near her. This time, she warned them not to touch her, or else she would be able to defend herself. However, the events turned sour as soon as the guys called her emo. All her past traumas came to light, and she was stuck in her head again, unable to move. Moments before the guys could even take advantage of her, Desumi offered some crepes to her little sister and told her that she had become even stronger now. In mere seconds, the guys fell on the floor, defeated. The little sister came to realize that her big sister might have been poisoned in love by the guy she so hated. Yet, she believed Desumi was not so bad at all, or so she hid her adoration. Another day had come, and another fight was created between the Gecko Society and the Gelatos. Expectedly, the 2 tabooed couple rendezvoused at the top of the hill where they enjoyed the season of fall. A moment came when Desumi handed a pamphlet to Fudo. It was about the festival that would be held at Desumi's school. She invited him to their festival so she could fulfill a supernatural belief wherein a couple would be invincible once they took a picture with the half-moon backdrop later at sundown. Fudo believed they were already an invincible couple, but also did not mind more foundation to his belief. Hence, he looked forward to a more challenging time with Desumi the next day. In all days of misfortunes, that day was one of them. Blue Gelato, Hayato, who was quite popular among schoolgirls and boys, went with Fudo to Desumi's event. Fudo was made a prop as Hayato stood on his shoulders to showcase his beauty to the girls. Fudo texted Desumi immediately about the complicated situation he was in and promised to come to her as soon as he could. Inevitably, some students recognized Fudo as a hero and ran towards him, so he ran further and faster and lost them. For goodness sake. Luckily, he was able to hide in a dark room which is designated to be the horror house of the event. He texted her to meet him there, and when both had finally met, a huge slash from behind them came. It was the discipline officer Kiki who had forbidden and loathed couples so much. Kiki, aka Beast Princess, had fumed greatly from the sight of couples, which included Steel Princess and Bear. At the same time, Fudo and Desumi hid as much as they could from the people as Fudo was well known, and they did not want to jeopardize their secret affair. Thus, when it was already time for the picture-taking sessions, both thought thoroughly of a way on how they could take a picture with the moon backdrop without the students' commotion. Time was ticking when Desumi saw Steel Princess arguing with a student who cosplayed Bear. She did not know why such a situation came up and had the wrong person with her. This popped an idea in Desumi's head. She told Fudo that they could change into their hero and villain suits and act as if it was just a cosplay of the infamous Red Gelato and Princess Reaper. Blessed by spirit, both were able to take a couple picture with the moon while everyone around them complimented their so-called cosplay. They blushed as they both smiled and felt like their want to become like a normal couple in public did not feel as far as impossible then. Desumi had lunch with the Beast Princess and Steel Princess at the Gecko Society's cafeteria when they spoke about Judgment Princess. She was a loner who refused to get along nor to be friends with others, an outcast that most people perceived her as. Anyhow, Desumi tried to approach the princess, but she turned Desumi down in the most obvious way. Strong Desumi did not stop there. She stopped Judgment from walking away any further and handed her a letter. It was an invitation to a strategic meeting to be held inside Desumi's dorm room later that night. When the night came, the Beast Princess yelled at the sight of the setting. Desumi actually planned a Tokiyaki pajama party to celebrate friendships and baited them with a strategic meeting invitation. Amidst all that, Gecko Princess, whom Beast and Steel did not know was Hojo, clung to Desumi for the whole duration of their pajama party, that even the Beast Princess asked about it. A few moments later, the doorbell rang. It was the Judgment Princess who impersonated Red Gelato for whatever suspicious reason. She then transformed back into a little green-haired girl who was also in her pajamas. She entered the dorm room poker-faced as she sat down to participate in the strategic meeting. However, Desumi told the Judgment Princess about her plans and about her wish to be friends with her. The Judgment Princess, although she showed no emotions, was taken aback by the gesture. What amused her the most was Desumi's gift, which was a scarf for each of the three of them. Definitely, after she got out of the dormitory late at night, she let out a monotone laugh. It was something to look forward to. On a snowy mountain days after the pajama party, the Gelatos and Gecko Society went to fight again. While the group fought for their lives, in an igloo-like ice cave, Desumi and Fudo enjoyed their hot chocolate together. While at it, Fudo shared wonderful news about his book being published. He told her about his book signing event, and Desumi promised to be there for his book to be signed by him too. That day came, and while Desumi was still in class for her last subject, she had her heart pounding in excitement for the book signing event, but misfortune rained upon her. She suddenly fell on the floor of her classroom. Immediately, her best friends persuaded her to be brought to the infirmary, but she refused as she would rather die than skip the book signing event. Unfortunately, her body could not hold her fever any longer. With no choice, Blood Princess, aka their school nurse, helped her as she laid down on the infirmary bed. For context, Blood Princess's way of treating patients would be like a mother. As a result, patients had regressed into babies when cared for by her. And like any other person, Desumi had begun to feel that way and was even changed into baby clothes by the Blood Princess. Beast Princess and Steel Princess were in desperation to help Desumi, but they were too late and were cared for by the Blood Princess in a special baby room deep below the establishment. On the flip side, no one went to Fudo's book signing event, but he was worried more about his lover who had texted him that she couldn't come. And at that moment, he arrived. His manly soul almost awoke him when he saw Desumi in a baby suit, which was styled like a swimsuit. Desumi awoke but acted like a baby who wanted her books to be read. So, Fudo read his newly published book and casted the spell away. Desumi almost screamed from what she was wearing, but that did not stop them from their lovey-dovey moment when Fudo found out she had a fever. At the same time, Fudo shared the bad news about his book signing event. but was only uplifted and fell even more in love with Desumi when she offered to be the first one to seek his autograph. Another day, another fight between the two organizations. Below the shade of a tree under the spring sunlight, the two tabooed lovers sat down to spend time with each other. Desumi made macaroons, which Fudo termed as small hamburgers. While he enjoyed the macaroons, or small hamburgers, he also informed Desumi of another commercial that he would lead again for the Galato's sponsorship funding. He took the script from behind and handed it over to Desumi. Desumi was delighted to have heard the news not until she saw the title of the commercial. It was a wedding commercial for a wedding cake brand. He was to cut the huge cake with a famous actress who stated in an interview that she liked Red Gelato the most. Desumi instantly told Fudo to dare refuse this commercial. Jealousy filled her heart as it broke the moment Fudo questioned her decision for his work. He slapped her with his words as he told her how selfish she was. Desumi slapped him and cried as she went away. Fudo, who was as dense as ever, did not realize why she acted that way. So, Haru, who had been eavesdropping for a while, had made him realize that he was at fault that time. He understood that Desumi did not feel comfortable with the idea that her lover would cut a wedding cake with a total stranger. Hence, Fudo flew back to the headquarters and begged to turn down the commercial. Professor Big Gelato did not know where his nonsensical decision had come from, as this was a huge sponsorship for the heroes. So, he was almost out of his mind and tried to find a way how to make it up to his girl. Then, an idea popped into his head. He wanted to bake a cake for him and Desumi to cut before he could even dare cut a cake with someone else. It took him days to perfect a cake, and he forgot to text Desumi. Meanwhile, Desumi had waited for days for his text as she worried about the cake-cutting scene. She was on the verge of doubting their relationship already and had a dark, menacing aura around her that the combatants feared more than ever. Suddenly, the gecko alarm sounded to gather the Princess series and the monsters at the meeting hall for something special. Bossler had completed the process of creating their greatest monster, Ultimate Phantom, which turned out to be a baby vampire with its bat wings and a pacifier in its mouth. All of them thought it was weak, but in mere seconds, it lashed Bossler into the wall. They attacked the monster as it was out of control. The attack began with the Princess series, but as soon as the monsters attacked, the bear was eaten alive. Steel Princess cried in agony as she tried to attack with more aggression. While the baby flew away to the city to destroy humanity and dominate the world, Desumi had her own world. She had lost hope in their relationship, as she thought he was already slicing a cake with a stranger by then. On the flip side, Fudo had finally achieved a decent-looking cake with a card written, Desumi X Fudo, and then a tiny little heart. She received a call from Fudo as he wanted to cut the cake with her before his commercial. In the end, he was already on set when Desumi disregarded his calls and was about to cut the huge wedding cake when the baby monster threw a massive missile to the set. Fudo told the actress to look for safety when he noticed that the cake he specially made for him and Desumi had fallen on the ground. He was about to cry when there was no time, and the Gelato needed to transform. Similar to those from the gecko, the Gelatos were easily defeated by the monster. It got to a point where Steel Princess was eaten alive the moment she, Desumi, and Beast Princess followed Ultimate Phantom. Desumi only learned about the attack on the set via television news. This got her worried sick and guilty for not receiving Fudo's calls. Nonetheless, she saw him in action, and still distracted, she saw the fallen cake with their names on it. This made her realize that Fudo indeed truly loved her. But despite this realization, they had to finish the fight before anything else. Unfortunately, after the Gelato's weapons transformed into one giant sword for greater power, the four members were taken by the monster. This left the wounded Red Gelato in crisis. But as fate brought two rivals together, Desumi, aka Princess Reaper, helped him slay the enemy who turned into a huge cake monster after eating the huge wedding cake. Consequently, they realized that they were actually slicing a cake together, but in hero-villain form. In the end, they were both applauded by the world, as two rivals who worked together for the safety of humanity. Behind their face gears, the two exchanged love affirmations and reassurances that despite their situation, they knew that their love had dominated the world. And that's the end of this anime recap, guys. Hope you liked the video, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next one.